Now, the next two I'm about to give you are my staple. I make sure I do one or both of these with every bicep exercise that I do. In this video, I'm gonna rate my top bicep exercises for men over 50. Now, why men over 50 and not just all bicep exercises? Well, being an older man typically comes with more wear and tear in your joints, meaning shoulders and elbows and wrists and things like that. And yeah, there are a ton of phenomenal bicep exercises. With that said though, there are some that are gonna be a lot better for you older guys. Personally, I'm 50 years old and there's a lot of things I used to do in my 20s and 30s I no longer touch. The very first one that I do not do before I get into the better exercises is barbell curls, man. I used to load up the barbell really heavy and just rep out some curls. The thing about that though is it wreaked havoc on my elbows and my wrists. So I pretty much threw those away, stopped doing those, and replaced that exercise with a lot of other awesome exercises I'm about to share with you. In this video, I'm gonna give you 5 of the more common ones that I typically do. And I'm gonna start with the 5th rated one and go all the way down to my favorite, my number 1 exercise. So we'll take that approach. With that said, let's get started with these exercises. Very first one is Zottman curls. So I like doing Zottman curls. It's basically one of those all over arm exercises where you get to work your forearms a little bit, you work your biceps. The thing about the Zottman curls though, is you don't get to put enough load on the dumbbells to really maximize the growth of your biceps. And that is a bicep exercise that I've talked about in other videos. But what I'm trying to do with this one is just go from my top 5, but we're starting with probably the worst of the 5. All right, so Zottman curls would be number 5 for me. And number 2 is gonna be concentration curls. So this is one of those that was made popular by Arnold Schwarzenegger himself years ago. And it's one of those exercises I used to do a lot. But the thing about a concentration curl, if you don't do it right, you're actually gonna feel some strain on your shoulders. Not only are you gonna feel strain on your shoulders, but it's very easy to cheat with the weight. You'll see people, you're leaning it up against your inside of the leg, of one of your legs. A lot of people will actually use a different angle to get the weight up. You'll lean into it, which is gonna cheat the movement. You'll use a little momentum, and you may actually use the leg to help you if the weight becomes a little too heavy. So for that reason, although it's not a bad exercise, I'm gonna rate it number 4. Now, number 3 is a high cable flex curl. So I do like the high cable flex curls. One thing I like about doing this is I've done it with both cables simultaneously like I'm doing here in the video. I've also done one side at a time. You don't need a whole lot of weight when you do this exercise. So one of 2 things happen. When you do an exercise without putting a lot of weight on it, you don't wanna overload too much, but if you try to go too heavy with this exercise, then you're gonna be cheating the movement. And if you don't go heavy enough to really elicit muscle growth, then it's not gonna do a lot for overall muscle development. The thing about this exercise that I do like is you do work from a higher arm angle, and you do typically feel this towards the bicep and the shoulder. So that bicep shoulder attachment is gonna get some of the work. And what I mean by that is a lot of the other exercises, you're gonna work more of the lower bicep. That's where you're gonna feel a lot of those. This one, more of that higher bicep, which I really like. Another thing with this, if you don't have perfect form, then it's really easy to hurt your shoulders. Misalignment of this will actually do yourself disservice. You're not gonna get the full benefits of this exercise if you're not aligned properly or using the proper amount of weight. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with this exercise. So it's never really a staple exercise of mine, but I do incorporate it probably every other month or so, because one thing I do want to get across here is all of these are fairly good exercises. So it's okay to go through all of them, but you don't need to keep them as your staple exercises. Now, the next 2 I'm about to give you are my staple. I make sure I do one or both of these with every bicep exercise that I do. The number 2 exercise that we're about to talk about now is incline dumbbell curls. So I've done a ton of videos talking about me doing this exercise with most of my bicep workouts. And it is a phenomenal exercise. I like the full stretch that you get. I like that you're able to get your elbow actually behind your body, which is gonna create a bigger stretch in that bicep, which is what you want. You want a maximum stretch. But the key to doing this is proper alignment again. So that's a common thing you're gonna hear me talking about with these exercises. If you're not aligned properly when you're doing this, you're gonna feel it in your shoulders. Also, on the way up, you'll see a lot of people moving their elbows forward, which is going to minimize some of the tension in your biceps, so you're not gonna get the full benefits of the exercise. Unless you're doing it perfectly every time using strict form, then you're gonna miss out on a lot of the benefits that this exercise will provide. And once again, you can't go very heavy with this exercise. If you're doing everything strictly, then you're not gonna be able to overload the muscle a lot. Now, for that reason, that's why we're going into my number one exercise, which is the alternating dumbbell curl. So the thing I like about this is you can make it work with your body, meaning the rotation of your hands. You're gonna get proper movement mechanics. So if you've got immobile wrists or elbows or things like that, then you can use this exercise to work within your limited range of motion. Now, the other thing I like about this and why it's my number one exercise, you can really overload your biceps, meaning you can go heavier on this exercise. Now, when I talk about heavy, I still talk about probably the 6 to 12 rep range, and you wanna challenge yourself within that rep range. So really force yourself to lift as heavy as you can, using perfect form though, and controlled movements. So when you're lowering the weight, you wanna control the weight. When you lift the weight, it's okay to lift explosively. Now, the key to doing this correctly though, is not cheating the movement. Similar to what I talked about with the incline dumbbell, where if you move your elbow forward as you're lifting the weight, you're removing tension from the bicep, that's cheating the movement. It's actually limiting the range of motion. You actually want to keep your elbows pinned to your side when you're doing this. Now you're rotating at the wrist. The wrist is rotating, which is perfectly fine, which is another thing that makes this a great exercise. As you supinate the dumbbell up, meaning as you're bringing that pinky up higher than your thumb, that's called supination of the wrist. That's gonna give you a peak contraction at the top of that movement, which is what you really want to do with all of the bicep exercises. But that's what makes this one so well. So you set yourself up with being able to overload more weight. You can go a lot heavier on this one than you can these other exercises we just talked about, which is another thing that makes this my number one bicep exercise, because you can really get a lot of good bicep work when you're doing this. So for that reason, this is always a staple exercise in all of my arm workouts. Okay, now with that said, let me leave you with one bonus exercise. Another one I do like that I didn't go over is a preacher curl. Now I do like preacher curls, but there's a lot of different variations to doing preacher curls. So for that reason, I really didn't cover it. The gym I was at doesn't have a true preacher curl that I like. But there are a lot of good gyms out there that have preacher curl machines or benches, whatever you want to do. You can also do preacher curls on an incline bench, which works fine. However, going back to the gym I was at, the benches are extremely high, so I couldn't get a comfortable position to film an actual preacher curl. But if you do a preacher curl movement, I would probably rate that right in the middle of these. I would still put my alternating dumbbell curls in there. I would still put my incline dumbbell curls. Now, instead of the flex curls being the next one, I would probably go into a preacher curl. Now, with that said, all of these great exercises, you can cycle through these other ones just to make sure you have a good amount of exercises to choose from, so you can break up the monotony from week to week. Because if you keep doing the exact same workouts over and over, and when you're like me, I've been working out over 30 years, it can get really boring. So that's one of the reasons I like to have several. I have my staple that I choose to use for all of my workouts, but then I also have others that I kind of filter through. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you like this series that we're doing. I've got some other ones out there for my favorite tricep exercises and favorite leg exercises, and I also rate those. So make sure you check those out as well. With that said, thanks again for watching, and as always, get busy, get after it, and God bless.